Welcome into a very special and a very first of its kind all city media at the winter meetings. I'm Patrick Lyons from DNVR Rockies in Denver.
I'm Jesse Friedman from PHNX.
And I'm Ryan Herrera, CHGO Cubs.
And we got to talk about the Arizona Diamondbacks right now because they have a bit of an issue, Jesse, but it's probably a good problem a lot of teams would love to have. They've got too many outfielders right now. You wrote a really great article over on gophnx.com. It's unlocked. Folks need to go ahead and check that out, where you break down all four of the candidates in the outfield. But the two guys that seem like they're in the discussion the most, Alek Thomas and Jake McCarthy, in your opinion, who should the Diamondbacks trade between those two guys if they were pressed to do it during these winter meetings?
Well, first of all, I can just feel Diamondbacks fans watching this, just like they're just going crazy at the thought of needing to trade one of these guys. But yeah, the D-backs are in a very advantageous position. I mean, anytime the market doesn't have a lot of something and you have too much of it, like, you're in a really powerful position. And so I think the D-backs are likely to make a move here, as you talked about. But yeah, it seems like Corbin Carroll is kind of off the table. I don't think the D-backs are really willing to go that route. Daulton Varsho just brings so much value and, was a 5-WAR player this last season. It's going to be hard for them to really, gain that value back in a trade. And that leaves you with Alek Thomas and Jake McCarthy as the trade options. And yeah, I mean, they both are valuable in their own way. Alek Thomas had a good year at the beginning when he was first called up. I think you picked him for Rookie of the Year, if I'm not mistaken.
Wisely.
Yeah, I mean, it looked good for a few months there. A few months, yeah. And then eventually actually got sent down to Reno at the end. The offense was just kind of a struggle for him toward the end of the season. And then you've got a guy in Jake McCarthy who was kind of viewed as like a fourth outfielder, like not even necessarily that much of a prospect coming into the season. And then, in the last 65 games of the year, he steals 22 bases and hits 300 and, did a lot of really great things for the Diamondbacks. So, yeah, it's a really, really tough decision for them. And they're not the same guy, right? I mean, Alek Thomas is going to net you more in a trade, most likely because of his prospect status. But Jake McCarthy is kind of a sell high guy, where even though his value might not be quite as high, even now, it might be as high as it will ever be. So it's an interesting juxtaposition between the two guys.
Yeah, I say Suzuki.
He was my pick.
Rookie of the year.
He was my Rookie of the Year pick.
Did he get any votes in the NL Rookie of the Year award voting?
I don't think he did.
He was a lot of people's Rookie of the Year pick.
Yet, that was my full season prediction when it came down to it. But it's amazing that a guy like, say, Suzuki, who, much vaunted coming over from Japan, getting a nice little deal, obviously, from the Chicago Cubs. They're paying well. And yet Jake McCarthy, a guy, I mean, Diamondbacks fans weren't even really buzzing about him to begin with. And yet Jake McCarthy did get at least one Rookie of the Year award vote. So that kind of lets you know maybe how the organization thinks about him or really what the hype was on a guy like McCarthy. I think he was late in the first round. So, again, first round guy, but when you have Corbin Carroll and when you have guys like Alek Thomas, you are going to get overlooked in that capacity. So the question really comes down to, if you have two really good players, is it about trading the guy that you could sell high on or trading the guy that's just going to bring back the most in a return? Is it a case-by-case basis? What would you do in an instance like that, Ryan? Selling the guy that's selling high or the player that is really going to give you the biggest return?
I think I would pick the player that you can sell high on, because if it's someone that you don't know if they can keep that kind of production up, someone that when I think about it just off the top of my head, and it's nothing against him, but for the Cubs, like Christopher Morel broke out this year, had a great year, had his ups, had his downs, but overall was a really good year for a 23-year-old coming up from Double-A. And then you think about it, is like, he's young, he had a really good year for a young guy. He will go into his prime and he could keep it up for sure, but will he? You don't know for sure, because he was in the top 30 on most for Cubs prospects on most of the prospect rankings, but he wasn't necessarily like a guy that everyone was high on, and he just kind of blew up. So to tie into Diamondbacks, it's like, who is this the guy that you can trust to keep up this production as he gets older and more acclimated to the major leagues, or did he just have a really good rookie year and he might fall off? That's the way I look at it. And again, nothing against our guy Christopher Morel, but he's just a guy you don't know for sure if he can keep that kind of production up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Jake McCarthy is I think D-backs fans believe in him, whether they should or not. I don't think there's many D-backs fans who look at the season he just had and are doubting that. I mean, maybe he won't do like what he did at the end of the season, which was like, I mean, the equivalent of like an all-star level outfielder. Maybe he's not going to go that crazy, but there's just something about his game and the way that he plays the game and the fact that he has like 98 percentile sprint speed, but is also like a pretty big guy who you figure could maybe grow into some power. D-backs fans love the guy. And they like Alek Thomas too. And so they're just going to be angry no matter what trade the Diamondbacks make, if they do make one. But in some ways, it feels like there's no way for them to really win here with the fan base.
The only good thing that came out of any Diamondbacks versus Rockies series all year long was in September when the Diamondbacks came, and I laid my eyes on Jake McCarthy. And I was like, who is this guy? Like, he's really, really good. So I was really impressed by that. And as you said, he kind of dominated, and September play is much different than it has been in the past when rosters would expand to like a full 40 guys. And you're like, hey, you're just giving this guy some experience, mopping up some innings. That's not the case anymore. So, you know, what you do in September is worth a little bit more. It's late in the season. So, you know, guys are a bit run down. So you take it with a little grain of salt, but not the grain that it used to be. I'm going to push back just a little bit and say, what about Daulton Varsho? Now, again,
you're making D-backs fans angry again. Come on, Patrick.
Look, you can be as angry as you want until you see what the return that you're going to bring back.
Fair.
And you see how the picture looks in the long run, because he's a guy that, correct me if I'm wrong, only has 3 more years left of club control.
He has 4 more years.
He does have 4.
Yeah.
All right. So that does obviously
but
change
they're all ARB years because he was a Super 2 guy. So if he hits 27 home runs 2 or 3 more times, he's going to get expensive pretty quickly here.
Sure. So 4 years again is nothing to shake a stick at.
Yeah.
Whereas all the other guys we're talking about 6+. Like you're going to get 6 more full seasons out of Jake McCarthy, maybe even more, depending on what happens with Corbin Carroll, as well as Alek Thomas. So you got to look at that window and just say, all right, well, if he has, he's going to help a contender maybe a little bit more immediately, that's also going to net the Diamondbacks a little bit more as well. Would you be okay if we made it a full trifecta here and Daulton Varsho was in that conversation? What would your thoughts be on maybe a return for a guy like Daulton Varsho, who's a little bit more finished, and maybe a contender does say, yeah, you know what, Alek Thomas might be better, but Varsho fits in that much better onto our roster. Could you see him maybe possibly netting the same amount of return as an Alek Thomas?
You net more. I mean, there's no question about it. I think that the D-backs would have a hard time making the move because, like I said, he had 27 home runs this last year. And other than Christian Walker, they don't really have any other big-time power hitters on the roster. And so I think there's some risk with trading Varsho for a guy, that maybe you're not going to get that much power back from. But yeah, I mean, there's no question that Daulton Varsho he's the proven guy. Like he has way fewer question marks about his game than Alek Thomas or Jake McCarthy. Daulton Varsho was arguably the best outfielder in baseball last year defensively. And so
up there, for sure.
Yeah. And so
defensive run saves really liked him. I know that, right?
Yeah. Outs above average also. Yeah. All of the defense metrics love Daulton Varsho, frankly. I don't think there's really any debate about that. And so the fact that he's already that's a skill that is going to play. That's not going to be like an up and down thing. Most likely his defense is going to be elite. And his offense isn't actually that great yet. Like he hit 27 home runs, but he had like a 740 OPS or something like that. But there's some potential there where, if you have an elite defender who, grows a little bit offensively, you could be talking about Daulton Varsho being like a genuine all-star, he was already a 5-win player this last year, so he's already nearing that level. So, there's no doubt that a contender would love to have a guy like that. I just don't know if the Diamondbacks are at a point where they're willing to give up a guy like that. They're also in a stage right now where they want to win. They're not trying to deal away major league pieces at this point. So, the return would have to be substantial. But I think you're right that it probably would be. And maybe, Diamondbacks fans would feel better about that once they saw what a Daulton Varsho could bring back.
And I know you and Derek have been talking about this on the pod already in the last couple of weeks leading up to the winter meetings. Make sure you're over on the PHNX sports channel on YouTube to catch up on a lot of that. But Varsho has the 4 years left, whereas all the other guys are 6 or more.
Yeah.
Can you speed up that window of contention just a little bit? And so that's where McCarthy and Alek Thomas fit in. What do you think would be the D-backs' biggest need in a return if they were to let go of an Alek Thomas or a Jake McCarthy? Because those guys are obviously young you don't need to get any younger. You almost want to speed up that clock just a little bit. So what would you want to see in return for either one of those players?
The D-backs got a catcher, like a guy that they felt strongly about who could be a franchise catcher for a number of years. I think that would be I don't think there would be much pushback if the Diamondbacks were able to pull that off. They also could use a third baseman. They don't really have any clear long-term solutions at third base right now. So, but yeah, it's going to have to be a guy who is already major league ready. The team has been pretty clear about that, and a guy who would stick around for a while. They don't want a 2 or 3 year rental. So third base and catcher are probably the main ones that come to mind. Mike Hazen, the Diamondbacks GM, also loves his starting pitcher. So if there's a young, controllable starting pitcher out there, I'm sure the D-backs would probably be interested in that as well.
Rockies have a third baseman, Elihuris Montero. We'll work the deal out. We'll work the trade out. We're gonna be doing plenty of these little trade negotiations on the side. I don't know if any of our GMs will actually listen to us, but we can always try, and we're gonna be trying all week long here down in San Diego at the winter meetings.
Maybe this is the low bump that they need to do it.
This is the bump. Yes, we need your bump as well. Make sure you're tuning in all week long while we're down here, All City Media, for the 2022 MLB winter meetings.